Hello and good morning. I hope everyone enjoyed the welcome by Dr. Henderson. Again, I am Candace Weber, Chief of Partnerships at the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children. It is my privilege to welcome you to the first session of the day. Before we dive in, just a few quick housekeeping items just to ensure a smooth experience. So we are in the Zoom room. You can chat with our speaker and myself. I'll be playing the role of moderator this morning. You can use the chat box feature. If you're having tech problems, feel free to chat me. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can type them in the Q&A box. We will have time for Q&A at the end, so don't hesitate to ask your questions as we go along. And so with that being said, I'm excited to get us started for this morning's sessions. We will be joined by Dr. Joyce Farrow. Dr. Joyce Farrow is the chair of the Department of Education at LSU Shreveport, where she teaches courses in the undergraduate and graduate programs in literacy, special education, and early childhood education. Prior to stepping into the higher education classroom, she taught for 29 years, wow, in public education schools in Missouri, South Carolina, and North Carolina at the elementary and middle school levels. Her research interests lie in literacy and teacher education policy, and to e-learners. So at this time, I'm going to go backstage, and the next voice you will hear will be that of Dr. Joyce Farrow.
Good morning and welcome to my session. I'm gonna make sure I share my screen with you all so you can see my PowerPoint, but I am going to be presenting this morning on the benefits of high quality preschool education and building the foundation for a better world. And so to start off with, I'm Dr. Joyce Farrow. I'm the department chair for education at LSU Shreveport, just down the road from Rushton. And my slides do not want to advance, so give me a second here and find out why that's happening. I might have to do that a different way. Apologize for that. Let's try this way. Might not be quite as big, but I might be able to move through my slides better, and hopefully you'll be able to see these as we go. So, high quality early learning environments are essential for fostering the development of young children. These environments typically provide a safe, engaging, and stimulating atmosphere that supports children's physical, emotional, cognitive, and social growth, so whole child. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the key components when we're talking about high quality early learning centers or early learning experiences. And to start off with, this typically means that these centers are licensed and accredited, which means there's somebody that is checking on them and making sure that things like physical safety are accounted for, that the environment is clean and kept to a basic standard, that the well-being of the children and of all of the physical elements within the center are up to standards, that we don't have toys with missing parts or broken pieces of furniture and things like that. So safetyness is a huge piece of this. Also, it helps to ensure that there's a welcoming atmosphere for children and families, that the center is accessible, and those types of things. Along with this, typically a high quality early learning center is going to have a low staff to child ratio. And what that does is it helps to ensure not only the safety of the children, but also the learning and development of the children in all of those different domains that I talked about a moment ago. It also looks at curriculum, and you're thinking to yourself, curriculum for little ones. Yeah, but we're talking about developmentally appropriate curriculum, and we're not talking necessarily about learning how to add and subtract and all those things that we associate with school, but we're thinking about developmentally appropriate, and we're including play as a part of that learning experience. And we're making sure that there's a diversity of resources and manipulatives and activities for the children, that there's a balance of inside play and outside play, that there's a focus on making sure that children have the opportunity and the experience to explore and engage with their caretakers. And so having a low child to staff ratio helps with those things, as well as having that developmentally appropriate curriculum. And so a lot of that means there's a lot of active hands-on learning happening, that there's time for children to explore and discover at their own pace and geared towards their own interests. And the staff or faculty in those centers encourages that and helps to foster that with children. And so when they show an interest in something, that they help the children to explore that further and go with them as far as they want to go with that. These centers also engage again in those very stimulating learning spaces. And so everything is geared toward the age and size of the children in the specific rooms. And so in a toddler room, you're not going to see anything that's, much above 2.5 feet tall, because that is about how tall a toddler might be, right? And so all of the things that are in the room are geared towards the children, not towards the adults in the room. High quality early learning centers also have strong parental engagement and foster that. So that welcoming atmosphere, that having the opportunity to drop in, to talk with caregivers, to perhaps have the ability to get pictures or video throughout the day to see what's going on with their kiddos while they're at the center. Also, these centers typically provide professional development opportunities for their faculty so that they continue to grow as educators themselves. And then, of course, these centers are inclusive and equitable, which means they are open to all children, whether they have perhaps some learning differences or physical disabilities, across the gamut of socioeconomic backgrounds, all of those different types of things. So when we talk about high quality early learning centers, those are some of the characteristics that we're actually looking at. Next, I want to turn to if a child is at a high quality and has access to those learning opportunities, there are some benefits that research has shown that these kiddos have, right? And so some of that is they have enhanced cognitive development, which means they are exposed to early on engagement with literacy, books, writing implements, those types of things, and also numeracy skills. So they're beginning to learn some of those things within the early learning centers, beginning again when they begin to show an interest in those things. And then as they get older and closer to school age, beginning to really have some more focus on some of those early literacy and numeracy skills. We've also noticed in research that these kiddos are more ready for school than kids that do not have these experiences. And typically over time, they tend to have a higher propensity for IQ and academic achievement. So they're more successful once they do begin school. They also have increased language and communication skills, better social skills, increased emotional regulation, stronger self-esteem, expanded vocabulary, so many things that we think of more as soft skills in the workplace, but these kiddos are developing these things because of their exposure to these high quality learning environments, which is so important. We've also noted in research that sometimes we're seeing a decreased enrollment in special education for kids that have the opportunity to attend a high quality learning center as a preschool or early in their early years. Following these kiddos longitudinally, we also have noted that they also have long-term academic and personal success, which means they're more likely to finish high school, to go to college, to complete college, to join the workforce and continue to grow and become successful professionals in whatever career path they choose. So essentially, we're getting to greater lifelong well-being because, as you know, the more advanced you are in your career, the more likely you're to have a higher salary increase, more benefits, those types of things. And that trickles down to, their family when they begin to have their own children. So switching from the benefits to the children, let's talk a little bit about the benefits to the workforce. So when workers, no matter what profession, have their children in high quality early learning centers or experiences, they have increased workforce participation, which means they're less likely to call in sick or be absent from work, and their productivity goes up. In a lot of senses, because they know their children are cared for, they're comfortable with where they're at, they know they are in a safe and well established establishment. And so they are more likely to be able to focus on their work and less worried about what's happening with their kiddos. In addition to that, the workforce tends to see higher or better retention rates. And so, employees are more likely to stay there more long-term, which again allows them to grow in their careers because they're in the same places or in the same profession for a much longer time. It also provides for a better mental health for parents and caregivers, a better work-life balance. And all of that goes back to, again, that high quality, that accreditation, the fact that these centers are essentially taking on an additional caretaker role for their child. And it's almost an extension of the family, so to speak. Specifically for women, moms, right? It helps support working mothers because, for many families, mom is the primary caretaker when issues come up with the children. They're the ones that have to be there for them. They're the ones, in a lot of families, not all families, but that does foster them staying in the workforce as well. Long-term, that also improves economic stability and growth in an area or a region. It supports the labor market. It decreases the need for social services and increases tax revenue overall, which is wonderful, of course. It also provides cost savings long-term when children are more successful along the line as they move from early childhood experiences into school-based experiences into college. Cost savings happen for society overall because there's less need for social services, there's less unemployment, there's less need for food assistance and those types of things. So all of those things work together. And so then overall builds a stronger community for everyone. So these experiences then trickle into the workforce so successfully. So I know you're curious. So what about Louisiana specifically? And so I pulled some information for you. This is from a 2024 report that looked at every state in the United States in terms of early learning and how it was impacting particular states. And so this is Louisiana's. And what you'll note there is that there are a lot of children under the age of 5 who, I'm going to pull it up, have one or both parents in the workforce. So these are our children prior to school age. 347,000 is the number they have there. And so that's a lot of kids who need high quality care. And it is at an annual cost in Louisiana of about $10,000 for an infant, right? And there are grants available that help with that with low income parents to be able to afford high quality childcare. But on average, Louisiana provides just $21,910 a year for childcare, which is not a whole lot when we think about the number of children. And so there is some work that we could do in our state to allow or provide the opportunity for more children, especially children who are in lower socioeconomic status areas, who may not have as much access to high quality childcare experiences, and being able to put that out there for our children so that they can have these experiences and then have the benefits and our community benefits and so forth and so on. And so all of these things are so important to overall success for our community and our region. So I went through all of that very, very quickly, but I'm going to allow a little bit of time for questions. And I noticed that there are a few things in the chat here. So I'm going to see if I can see what that is. It looks like those questions were already answered. So yes, the symposium will provide the presentation, so you'll have access to all the materials. If there are any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat or to unmute yourself, and you may certainly ask.
Hi, Dr. Farrell. I thank you for kicking us off with this exciting session. I do have a question. Just curious, from your research or any data that you've seen, when it relates to we see the benefits and the economic impacts of childcare. And then I love how you ended with the affordability piece. And when we talk about access, we tend to think about affordability and accessibility, right? And so with the need, with the benefits that we know, is there any research or data that you've seen that's really looking at the, I guess, availability of childcare? Are you seeing expanded, more childcare centers popping up in our state, either in regions where there's growth, just to expand availability and access in a different way?
Not as much as I'd like to see. There is a little bit out there, and I'm noticing just anecdotally more so than actual hard numbers. But I live in a neighborhood with a lot of families that have young children, and what they're telling me is that school systems are beginning to provide more, at least 4K options, and there are more resources that the school systems are making available to their communities. And so, for example, in our area here in Shreveport, both Caddo and Bossier parishes in their school board websites offer to families a resource where they can go and look at all of the available childcare services in their parish, from Head Start services to private services to public services. And so they have a resource that at least you have a place to start to be able to go, I can go here, I can't go there. I have a contact, I can at least call them and ask questions and find out about what their enrollment is, what the cost is, what my commitment is, all of those different types of things. And so, I see some of those things. There are a lot more, I think, areas that are still in pretty dire need of some high quality learning centers or learning opportunities for young children. A lot of, in the lower socioeconomic areas, there's a lot more home care based, like daycare type situations. And although some of those can be really, really good, those are not usually accredited. And, they're limited because it's usually in a home. And so it might be, one mom or one grandma who's taking in kids. And so they really can't take in, as many as a center could. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And yeah, in Louisiana, family home child care isn't licensed. They can register, but they're not licensed, to your point. And I have seen and heard in, especially, lower economic communities, that tends to be the option for families. So I do see some more questions that are popping up. I believe Sonia Young has had her hand up for some time and she's coming on to ask her question.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay. My question is, you stated that the average childcare provider is making a little under $22,000 a year. As you know, that is below the poverty line.
Yes.
What is the state doing to make it more feasible for someone to want to be able to to provide quality childcare in their home? And the B part of that question is, what is, you stated how much we were making here in Louisiana. Have you compared it to other states, like neighboring states such as Texas, Arkansas, maybe even Oklahoma?
Yeah, so it's a pervasive low salary position across the country, unfortunately. Um, you know, if you've been a parent of young children and you've been looking for putting your child in some kind of daycare, learning center type situation, it can be really expensive. And so parents don't have a lot of money to provide that for their own children. And so having some federal or state funds that help offset that is so important. And that is part of why salaries are low, though, is, you know, it has, when you're trying to, I guess, entice parents to come to you, it has to be affordable for them. And to be affordable for them, sometimes that means you don't have a lot of money then to pay salaries and the upkeep of the center and all of those other things that have to happen. And so, you know, that's a piece of it. And that's why, you know, there's a push for more early childhood opportunities within the public school systems, because then that building's already there. There's already dollars that might be able to offset some of the things that might a private center or a center that's not connected to a school system has to keep in terms of keeping the building and the update and the lights and electricity and all of those different things. And so there is a bit of a push for that, as well as you know, when you're tied into the public school system, you're tied into the benefits, the salary schedules, and all of those different things, as well as the accreditation piece, but also the professional development. And so it's a little different than, of course, your question that was geared more towards home-based. But I'm not sure that answered your question very well, but it's definitely an issue that I think everybody is struggling with. And I know it's on the hearts and minds of a lot of folks that are invested in early childhood education. I've personally spoken with a committee here last spring in Shreveport about, you know, what we might be able to do. And unfortunately, right after that, you know, we had a change of governors, and there was some budgetary decisions made around some of the funding for early childhood things in our own state that was a little disheartening.
Thank you for that. And if I may, Dr. Farrell, Sonia, I can also add, at the Policy Institute, we actually have a grant, a $3 million grant from the Early Educator Investment Collaborative that's looking at this very issue. And so to Dr. Farrell's point, this issue, or crisis, we say, is nationwide, but we are working with 7 Ready Start networks or regions within the state who are specifically looking at ways to strengthen compensation and benefits for our early childhood sector. To Dr. Farrell's point again, I mean, we find that our early childhood teachers are some of the most highly credentialed educators in the state, which is required to accept public funding. However, they are often the lowest paid. Child care centers find themselves competing with the likes of our big box retailers and coffee shops because they can offer higher wages and benefits. And then coupled with the cost of care, child care business owners, because these very much are for-profit businesses, they often have to operate on razor-thin margins. And so it is what we would call an economic growth issue where there's those tension points, but we are actively looking at innovative ways to address that. you know, that's where we are with it. The state has apprenticeship programs to try to get people into the profession earlier, but then, you know, it goes back to the ability to retain them because of the low wage. And so how do we further professionalize the industry and also raise the compensation? And so we actually have a study around that, but it is on the hearts and minds of several of us in this space. So thank you for the question. I see we have Francine Prince has a question, and I think you can come off mute and ask your question.
Good morning,
Good
Dr.
morning.
and Dr. Weber. My question, I come from the background of a former Ready Start Network supervisor, as well as now working in the realm of professional development. So my question is wrapped around both because as I talk to a lot of programs, the lack of opportunities for professional development and having teachers be prepared, how do you think that falls on your hierarchy list for ensuring that those classrooms are highly effective? Because the only way you can be highly effective is if you are prepared to deal with the challenges that they face every day. And a lot of them are facing addressing challenging behaviors. That's an epidemic that we're seeing across the board. What are your thoughts on that? That's basically my question.
That's a great question. So I can talk about our educator preparation program at LSU Shreveport in particular. We have an early childhood band. Our teacher candidates are prepared, and our particular band is pre-K through third grade. But we also talk about children younger than that in those courses because developmentally, you may have a child who is 4 years old in your pre-K program, but developmentally they might be more like a 2 or 3 year old, depending upon their experiences before they came to you, right? So we have to be aware of how children develop from birth until they get to us in the early childhood grade bands, right? And so we talk all the time about, when we just had a discussion the other day in my class, and we were talking about behaviors, and we have a number of students who work part-time in daycares and things themselves as they're putting themselves through school. And we've talked about some of the behaviors they're seeing and some of the things that they need to think about as an educator and how they would handle the situations that might arise with children. And so we talked about everything from pushing and shoving and biting and kicking and refusing and, you know, full-blown tantrums and all of the different possibilities, and then how you handle all of those things. In our programs, of course, we have field experiences, and we also require the students to be in early childhood spaces and in our early childhood grades, at least half of those experiences, so across about 60 hours, they have to be in either a Head Start or a pre-K classroom. And so they're getting to see how the current faculty members are dealing with things that happen, and we talk about them in class. You know, what did you see? What did you witness? How was it handled? What would you have done differently? You know, how do you help children grow in their skills so that they are more able to self-regulate and those types of things? And so we're constantly not just talking about, but also putting into practice those things so that we are better preparing folks. Now, that's students that are going through a university program, and not all child care workers in centers have that background and experience. So your point about professional development is so on target. It's so needed. I think one of the hardest things to learn as someone who works with young people is, first of all, how do I facilitate their growth in an area? So, for example, children that are not, and you said behaving, so I'm going to say 2-year-olds, 1-year-olds, you know, we have a propensity for kids that get kicked out of preschool classrooms, daycares, and so forth for biting, right? That's one of the big things that comes up. And so what I talk to my students about all the time, and so part of that professional development is, you know, that's developmentally appropriate. When you don't have the language for things and you're upset, and the only thing you know is, you know, you have some control, you bite. That's very developmentally appropriate for children of a certain age, right? But in children that get a little older and they're still doing that, well, how do I help facilitate that so that they're no longer doing that? So we give them the words to say, and we give them the words that define their emotions and all of those different things. But that's hard to learn if you don't have someone to either mentor you in that or to teach you about that. But there's so much that we learn by watching children and being good observers of children as they play and as they interact with one another, to be able to facilitate their next steps in growing in their emotional growth, in their ability to regulate their own behaviors and stop themselves and use their words and all of those things. It's definitely a need. And again, those higher quality programs are able to offer more of that. You know, things like this symposium and other avenues we can continue to look at as programs that develop teachers in all areas. How can we reach back out and make things available to community members that might be, you know, working in childcare centers and would like to learn how to do those things? Is, you know, how can we offer that and get ourselves out into the community to help them grow in their own professional practice? I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
All right, Dr. Farrell, I'm in the chat, and so there's a few more questions, and I see our Q&A box is lighting up.
Awesome.
Question from Yvonne Crummins. Dr. Farrell, can you briefly explain similarities and differences among private, public, and Head Start?
Yes. So Head Start is typically federally funded. And so there are certain I don't want to say requirements, but parameters for those children that they accept into their programs. And it's often for students or children who are low socioeconomic, that have fewer resources and those types of things. And so they work, they have to follow federal guidelines for all of that, but they're typically located in lower socioeconomic areas of our communities as well. Sometimes that's great for the children, but it's not always sometimes great for faculty and employment in that type of thing. And only because, as we mentioned earlier, folks might come into work and they get their skills up, and then they're able to go somewhere that pays more. And so there's often a lot of turnover in those places. Private and public is, again, there's benefits to both, and it really all depends on the quality piece. So there are some really high quality private centers. There's some really high quality Head Start centers. There's some really high quality public centers. And there's some low quality ones as well. And it's just you know, part of it is whatever funds they have, whether they're federal funds, state funds, funds because of the tuition parents pay, those types of things all play into that. And so it's really hard to kind of judge them as a group because it's really individual based on the actual center itself. I don't know if that answers your question very well.
And I'll also add for participants, you can always go to LouisianaSchoolFinder.com and actually find out the ratings that Dr. Farrell is referencing, the quality rating of the center, whether it's public or private. In the state of Louisiana, they categorize them as like type 1, 2, or 3. And so type 3 are all of your publicly funded childcare centers, which mean they accept public funding for their particular center. Type 1 and 2 are generally your private or childcare centers. So Louisiana School Finder, you could search and find more about the different Head Start programs, private and public options available in the childcare space. So I wanted to offer
And
that.
Alex just dropped the link for that in the chat. So if you're interested in that, the link is in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question. I see in the Q&A, please give us a list of organizations that advocate for early childhood educators and young children. And so actually I can share, there are several coalitions of organizations that advocate for early childhood educators. We can include that list of coalitions within the post-session materials, but there are several that are advocating and, always looking to grow that list. And so thank you for that request, and we will make sure we include that in our post-session notes. The next question I see in the chat. Let's see. Just asking about your thoughts on pre-K 4 in the public school system.
I have, prior to coming into higher education and working at LSU Shreveport, I was in public education, pre-K through ninth grade in several different states, Missouri, South Carolina, and North Carolina before coming here. So my direct experience is not necessarily in Louisiana outside of higher education, but I have been privy to many really high quality pre-K programs in public school settings in all of those states. And we send our students into some really nice classrooms. I have a student right now who is in Keithville Elementary, and just raved about her first visit to their 4K classroom that she's doing her residency 1 field experience in, our student teaching experience in, and just talked how much she loved being in that classroom. And she's in the early childhood program with us, but she wants to teach second graders, and so that's not her grade level of choice, but she just loved that experience and talked about how child-centered it was, how caring the classroom teacher and her assistant were, how excited the children were when they came in the room and as they participated throughout the day. And so we have some really great public school 4K programs in our area here in Shreveport, and I'm certain across the state that are doing wonderful things and getting these kiddos ready for kindergarten. Every one of our students who comes back and reports of what they were seeing and what they're witnessing in those programs in our area are so positive about what they're seeing. And so in our classes, we talk about the different models for early childhood classrooms and theories behind it, and we talk about what they're seeing in the schools, and they're seeing those things in action. So we have some really well prepared high quality programs right here for our 4K students especially.
Great, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, and it looks like Janetta McGriff has her hand raised, and so she can come on and come off mute and ask her question.
Hi, you hear me?
Yes.
All
Hi,
right.
Janetta.
Hi, Dr. Farrell and Dr. Weber. It's just a curiosity in working in Head Start, in the admin position, but been down where the teachers and been a floater and all that. Do you find that a lot of the pre-K 4s, well, I won't say all, but a lot of them seem like they get drowned in the regular school system because of still learning, still growing. And, in Head Start, we started from 6 weeks up to 5-year-olds. So now it's dwindling down because of the school system is now taking on the responsibility of pre-K 4s and 5s. So it's almost as if to say, now we're losing those kids and we're losing a lot of staff because of the fact that a lot of the schools are getting those grant fundings. And it's hard to retain staff. It's hard to retain a good enrollment because of the fact that these children are going to these schools. But then when I talk to the parents, because I'm the family community engagement coordinator, they're like, oh, my child feels swallowed. They're not ready for this big, humongous school that they're in with all these different grade levels. You understand? And that's why I asked the question, how do you feel about pre-K 4? Because I find that some kids are not prepared or ready just yet. From going from 6 weeks to 3 years and now going into a big school, it's scary to me. It just seemed a little scary. Thank you
Yeah,
guys.
that's a great question, and what a great position that you're in to see all of that happening. And to have experienced so much of the process from, starting it as a floater and moving through the system, so to speak. So you have definitely a wealth of experience there. Yes, for some kiddos, and especially when we're talking Head Start, and so many of those kiddos, that is their first real rich experience where they're getting all of the different types of experiences and supports through the Head Start program itself. And definitely the public school system is different, and they are beginning to look more like a traditional classroom, even in the 4K rooms, some of them, and sometimes expectations for those kiddos is a little higher than maybe it should be. I am a huge proponent for let them play, right? And my passion for early childhood is, there's the return to allowing children to play. All mammals learn through play, not just human mammals, right? And so it's such an important part of learning, not just learning to be successful in school, but learning about life, about your place in the family and the community, and all of that is so important. And we have, as a society, moved so far away from that, and it's so important. So to your point, I think that's part of why the children that you're hearing about that had been in the Head Start programs and now are going into the schools, they move too quickly away from having that play-based classroom experience, and that's so important. And that's a big piece of why they might be feeling that they're being left behind, or, as you said, kind of swallowed in that system. The best programs that I've seen in the public schools continue and keep that play-based mentality and allow for that same experience. But as you're seeing, that's not always the case. That's something we as school systems need to be cognizant of. And I'm constantly telling my students, developmentally appropriate, developmentally appropriate, developmentally appropriate. And sometimes we forget that as we move away from being classroom teachers ourselves. And so I talk to my students all the time about, you have to advocate for the kids, and you have to help the parents advocate for their kids. And sometimes that's what gets the administrators or the folks that are making the decisions open their eyes and go, oh, you're right. I've been too far away. And when we remove ourselves from the direct interaction with kids, we sometimes forget what's developmentally appropriate. That's a great question, though. It's something we certainly need to work on.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Yes,
Thank you.
for the question, Janetta, and also thank you for your work in this space. And so that actually brings us to almost at the top of the hour, getting close on time. I do want to say thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Farrow, for sharing your expertise. So when this session ends, I just want to remind everyone, the Zoom app will close out, but you'll be brought back to the event lobby. Or, if you have it up on your page, remember I said in the beginning, that is your home page. But you'll also see the notification to take a survey. So let us know your feedback on this session. And actually, you'll get that notification as you pop in and out of sessions throughout the day. The next session is going to start at 5 after the hour, so 10:05. So in the meantime, after you do your survey, you feel free to hang out in the lobby, network with others. Both Dr. Farrow and I will be around. If you want to directly engage with us, you can do so via the chat in the lobby. But again, thank you for coming to this session. Looking forward to seeing you in the next session and throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you all.